welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, we have a special, inspiring guest. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Apolonia Rockwell Show. It was funny. Carol was just making me laugh right before we logged in here. But guys, I have somebody that Carol told me not to read her whole bio because it's going to take too long. And I'm going to do the speediest version because there's so many great points. But really quick, guys, Carol Kauffman, she is globally known as one of the top leaders in the field of coaching. Okay. She is a coach to many Fortune 100 CEOs and their teams, as well as a professor, advisor, speaker, and author. She is on faculty at Harvard, where she is the founder of the Institute of Coaching. In addition, she supervises an international fleet of leadership coaches and has created a coach approach training program with a global footprint. And the very last thing is Carol was also named the number one coach in the world by Marshall Goldsmith and one of the top 8 thinkers by Thinkers 50. Carol, thank you so much for joining. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. This is my first day home in quite a while.
You said you've been on the road since March 1st. Did I hear that okay?
Yeah. Yep. Although I was in one place for a while.
Okay. Yep. You and I both have this throat thing going on, which is messing with me and you too. But Carol, I'll just say, doing my research on you, I was telling you this offline. I am so inspired. And I think that we have some episodes that can really benefit the audience. And today's show, I know, will really benefit me. I feel like I'm going to be a student in your class today. And the listeners just get to benefit from our conversation. But, can you just start with your story? Can you tell me how in the world did you get to where you're at today? You are an author. You've written so much and have so much experience around coaching thought leaders and CEOs and high performers. And what have you learned through that journey? And how did you get there?
Okay, so how I got there. So I started out as a folk singer. Then I trained violin horses, and then I moved to people, and got a PhD in clinical psychology. And it was sort of shocking that I got in because people assume that because I'm a Harvard professor and blah blah, that I was one of these great students. I was a B- C student in high school.
You're giving everyone hope.
I also. And then in my first year of college, my second semester, I was so excited because the first time in my life I got all B's. In fact, I was going, I've got all B's, I got all B's. And my mother runs out because she thought I was being attacked by a swarm of bees. So that's not what people expect because I didn't care about school at all.
Interesting.
Then what happened is I transferred up to Boston University my sophomore year. And started taking psychology, and I just suddenly flowered. I became like this A- student, which was really shocking. Mm-hmm. And then through a lot of hard work and also good mentoring and also luck, I eventually got into a PhD program. Just to give you an idea, okay, so everyone in my program, they're like GREs, they're like in the 700s. Mine were like 590. I worked like a 650. About 200 points less than anyone in my program, but I'm good on my feet. So that's my superpower. So love it. Why do you know me? You know me because of one moment in my life. The following, I went to a coaching course weekend, and somebody was going to win free tuition at the end of the day, which I didn't, but there was a follow-up call, and I did win free tuition. But more importantly than that, before I got over the email that said I was the winner, I had this strong sense that I would be the winner. In which case, actually, what I thought was, no, I'm going to be really unhappy. So I then saw that I won, and I just had this feeling. Remember, I was just a nice little clinical psychologist with a peak performance training program. Okay, I was not headed towards this life.
Yeah.
And so what I thought is, okay, this is important. And so I remember I rolled my little oak chair up to the wall and I asked myself, if there's a life lesson for me now, I want to know what it is. Fortunately, in about 7 seconds, I got an answer because I'm not like whenever you're a patient, I can meditate people. The word that came to me was don't hold back. And I want to share that because those of you listening, don't hold back. Okay, so I thought that and I'm like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so I went through the next day, nothing. Went through the next day, nothing. The next day, Wednesday, I opened up this article. It was written by the former president of the American Psychological Association. And I had the thought, God, I'd really love to like call this person. And then what do you think my next thought was? Like any normal person, I'm like, oh yeah, right. Like he's
I'm too afraid. Yeah.
But then the thought came to me, don't hold back. So people think I'm super confident and that's why this all happened. But no, I had this mandate, like I wasn't allowed to hold back. So I didn't call the guy. I was afraid to, but I did email him. I didn't know that he was really religious about emailing back. And this turned out to be Marty Seligman, the father of positive psychology. We wound up traveling the world together.
Oh my goodness.
Doing a lot of work. In fact, I'm giving him a major award at the Institute of Coaching conference in May. And that was don't hold back.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Where do you think that inner voice came from? Like at that time in your life, were you into personal development? Was that a small voice from a parent? Like I'm trying to think, where in the world
did that come from?
Did those words
I have
come
no
from?
idea. That's the answer. I mean, if I was religious, which I wish I was, but I'm not, or believed in psychic phenomena, which I don't, then I would have an explanation for it.
Yeah,
but I don't.
Yeah.
I have no explanation for it whatsoever. And that's true for a number of experiences I have, but I may have no explanation for it, but I'm going to like do it. So what happened next, by the way, was I had the thought that I wanted to present at ICF, the International Coach Federation meeting.
Oh my goodness.
I mentioned this to my coaching teacher who said, you want to present at ICF? That's a long shot. Well, nothing would have made me do it more. Okay, long story short, I go there, I meet two people because I did get a keynote. One of them came up to me and this woman, Margaret Moore, who over time said, Carol, coaching needs an academic home and you need to create it. To which I said, no. She then did it 2 or 3 more times. And eventually I said, fine. I'll create one, but it'll be the institute I want, not what you want. Fine. Then later, because of that, don't hold back. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I do this thing that's way beyond my actual capacity. But I'm not allowed to hold back, so I have to do it. This other woman comes over to me, and long story cut short, she decides she would be my coach. Okay. And what I didn't realize was she was hazing me, and 3 years later gave me $2 million to start the Institute of Coaching. Oh, all from one moment. Don't hold back.
Oh my gosh. So
you don't need confidence, you need purpose.
I have chills. That went up my leg when you said the words, don't hold back first. And so where my mind goes when you say that is I go to limiting beliefs, and it leads me to my next question. What are some things that you've learned when you are coaching these top CEOs, these high achievers? They probably were wired like this from the time, I'm sure you see a lot of similar characteristics to like that top 1%. And so would you say a lot of the limiting beliefs are the same in top performers, or what are just some things that you've taken away from coaching these top CEOs?
Yeah, these guys don't have limiting beliefs.
Oh my goodness. Is that a male female thing? What in the world? I have so much to ask you.
Yeah, some of the women, they don't have limiting beliefs either. If anything, you have to like give them some. These people are very powerful. They've got a drive to succeed. They're bold. They're colorful. They want to make a difference. And it's not completely clear how much of they're just like graced with a very good biology that allowed them and intelligence, and how much of it is developed over time. But no, I mean, my guys, like during the pandemic, they're like, what's wrong with everybody? In fact, I wrote an article that got published in HBR, a blog thing, that I wanted to call The Dark Side of Resilience. But they
yes.
So they said, without compassion, what did they say? Without compassion, leaders fall short, or something like that. Because what I had to help my guys with is to say, listen, you stopped evaluating your people who are frightened. Like, get over it. I didn't quite say it like that, but I did ask a few questions. But no, my people, there's no lack of confidence there.
Wow. So then when you're coaching a group of men and women that they don't have these limiting beliefs, yet they're trying to take their leadership to the next level, what are some things, like what are your students struggling with if it's not limiting beliefs?
Okay. Well, my CEOs, my students are different. My students are like people like you and me. We're normal people.
Yeah.
But okay, so what do you do when you're suddenly like given one of these people? I mean, these are people that, like, in our own lives, we never meet these people. Like, how many people do you know have jets? Maybe you know some, but like, I don't.
Right.
Not in my life. But the first thing you have to do when you want to work with these people is you really have to not have limiting beliefs yourself.
Okay.
As the coach. But you also don't have to believe that you are the one who has to like give the answers. What you do need to do is, before a meeting, I remember my very first CEO, very intimidating woman. Oh. And before the meeting with her, I was thinking about, I want to be smart. I want to be this. I want to be that. And then fortunately, another voice in my head said, cut it out.
Wow.
This is not about me being smart. I'm either the person the universe is putting into her life to help her or not. My job, free myself up from the ego and be of service. And if you can get yourself into the headset, you can really, that just unleashes it. Because if you're worried about yourself, like even right now, I'm not particularly worried about, are people thinking I'm smart or whatever. As a result of that, I can be me.
Yeah.
If I had that all going on in my head, it would really be hard to just, be thinking like, I like Apolonia. I'm like, let's talk and this is fun. Because there's not this interference. And that really comes from freeing yourself up from ego. Ego goes two ways. Ego goes like, if 0 is ideal, sort of free, +5 or +10, we know, are the chest beaters. Okay. We know that kind of ego. But -5, -10 is just as ego driven. Okay. These guys want to go like, you think I'm great. The others are like, I'm afraid you're not going to think me great, which is just as ego driven. So whether you're afraid or whether you're more of a bully, you just have to get over yourself and try to be of service.
Have you noticed certain characteristics in high performance leaders, as far as effective leadership? I feel like your specialty is leadership. Yeah. How do you rally a team together and inspire and drive towards the vision while still being an operator? I mean, there's just so much around this. And so out of the most effective leaders that you've been able to see lead, inspire, and go towards a goal, what are those? What are the characteristics that those people have? No limiting beliefs, it sounds like, is one of them.
Well, they're very, very few. It's different for different people. One thing that helps, and for some of these people, many of them would not have picked coaching for themselves. Their board says, you got to get coaching.
Oh,
okay. One person's like, you want to be CEO? You cannot be CEO unless you have a year of coaching with Carol. So these people don't necessarily start out like all, sweetness and light. One of them is really serious. So guys, imagine this is you. Okay. So so Apolonia, you're me. I'm my guy.
Yeah.
And you go, hi, I'm Apolonia. This is his first response to me. Are you ready? It's like,
Yes.
How long is this going to take?
And then the blood rushes out of your face. You're so excited. You have a full day of coaching or, an hour of coaching all set up, prepared for him. You've done your research on him. And he's like, how long is this going to take?
How long is it going to, no, like this. How long is this going to take?
Oh, okay.
So,
what did you say?
Well, remember, what did I do before the session? I did everything I could to free myself up from ego. So I didn't take it personally.
Okay.
Nothing rushed to my head. What I did think was, well, gosh, if I was like this great business leader and I couldn't be like my CEO unless I talked to some twerp that I don't even know, well, I wouldn't like it either. So I just said,
Okay.
well, listen,
Fair.
I think that as a coach, your job isn't to fit into my schedule and my structure. My job is to be of service to you.
Okay.
So like, what's going on? Well, it was like a machine gun went off. I did this and 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 then he was like a terrible listener and he said something and I said, well, what was the result of that? And he goes, well, my most valuable person quit. And so I said, would you like that to not happen again? And that was it. That was the beginning. And with some of these people, you have to leave with data.
Okay.
And in this case, I said, let me tell you a tiny tutorial. I said, this is so funny, because people have psychological needs. To which he said, they do?
Shut the front door. Shut the front door. So I have to care about my people. I have to actually develop relationships with my people for them to become loyal.
So I just gave him a very quick 2-minute tutorial on it's actually self-determination theory, that people have 3 sets of needs: to be autonomous, to have relationships, and be able to be competent at work. ARC. And he's like, well, what if they can't be autonomous? And like, well, he goes, we're losing market share. Blah, blah. I'm like, well, forever? He said, well, no. I said, well, share that with them. Yeah. And so then I said, okay, so if you were going to be addressing these things in your people, what would it look like? What would you do? So this is an important thing about coaching, which I have discovered. I call it the infinity loop. So C is coaching.
Okay.
And C over here is like consulting or whatever. And I am of the belief that I don't tell my clients what to do.
Okay.
When have I ever run a multi-billion-dollar company, for God's sakes, So what I think of it as like an offer,
Okay.
And in ICF, actually, competency 711 is about how do you give an offer to someone in a coach-like way. But I found that a lot of times with these people, tiny tutorials that I then switch into questions really capture their attention.
Okay. What's an example? Like how does that lay out?
Well, so for this guy, I can't give autonomy. And so we talked about relationships. And then I mentioned Amy Edmondson's work at Harvard Business School on psychological safety and said, well, if your people feel psychologically safe,
yes,
they will feel more able to contribute. He goes, well, how do I do that? Well, that was easy because everybody said the guy doesn't listen like to anybody. So I said, how about listening? And he's like, okay. So then I had the limiting belief. I left and thought, OMG.
He's not going to get it.
This guy. Like, really? So then a couple of weeks later, I talked to him again for the second time. And this is very humbling, actually. And I write about this in the book. I call him Marcus. So I said, well, how did it go at the board meeting? And he goes, oh, it went really well. What he had said, once I had said this thing about autonomy and whatever, he said, oh God, I really have to change all my plans for my board meeting. So he realized that he had to let them speak more. Had the board meeting. And before the board meeting, he said he looked at each person. Now, this is a guy who 2 weeks earlier said, people have psychological needs.
Oh, right. Yeah.
What he said, believe it or not, he said, I looked at the people around the boardroom, like his team, and in front of every one of them, I imagined them as a 12-year-old. And I thought, okay, what do these all people need? And so what I said to them was, guys, of course they're all guys, listen, we're going to go into the board meeting. This is your meeting. You're supposed to shine. And no matter what happens, I'll have your back. And some of them started crying. Nobody had ever said that. So here's this guy, looks like a total moron with the psychological insight of a gnat. And look what he did in 2 weeks. So you never know. In this case, I had the self-limiting belief.
That is an incredible story, because so many of us, I think, are wanting to take the next step, and they're wanting to level up, maybe in their leadership. They want to be more effective as a CEO, or, maybe a department head within an organization, a business owner, whatnot. And just that little lesson of listen more and care
and have him
about
see the outcome of listening. If you said just listen for listen, he would like, ugh, do I care? But the idea is that it leads to psychological safety. It leads to performance. It leads to an optimal team. Then that caught his attention, because you have to know what matters to the person you're talking with.
Okay, right.
And then orient your questions around that. And sometimes I'm just very sweet and not confrontive. But a lot of times I'll say to someone, so like if you were going to step into a bigger job, you are a subject matter expert, and you are going to become a manager for the first time. And let's say the issue you got feedback about was delegating. So if I start with that, I would just say, first of all, do you want to work on delegating? What does it matter to you? And then I'd say, if you were a 10 out of 10 on delegating, what would that look like? Staying you. What would you do? Paint a picture. If I was watching a movie, just again, 10 out of 10, what does it look like? Because a lot of times people look at problems, but not want to be. And so coaching is about painting the future. And you're just painting the future with numbers. And then I'll say, okay, so what are you now? So let's say you were my client and you said 7. What I would then say is, what are you doing right that you're not a 6? Okay. And help them really identify that. And then say, okay, what can you do in the next 2 months to go from a 6 to a 6.5? And so that's a very, very simple coaching model. Sounds simple. It's based on a huge amount of research, which I'll put everyone into a coma if I describe it all. But yeah, so sometimes it's helped them see and develop a vision of who could I be at that next level.
And I like that example, because just running through that, a lot of that is me not answering my own questions, but that is me digging deep into, I do know the right answer. Like you mentioned, you're not telling somebody, these are the next steps that you need to do. That example was beautiful, because it allowed me to be free to name examples. This is what a 10 out of 10 would look like. Right now, I'm a 6 or 7. And you said, what would it look like to take the next step? And so I'm answering, I'm using my, my real world experience. And so, what is really, coming to mind as you already speaking is how much of your past life psychology background, how much does that play into the coaching role that you have today? Is it all intertwined?
I think it is intertwined, but then you have to think about what's the difference between coaching and therapy, or even when you're a peak performance trainer, because you're the expert there. But in therapy, as you listen to it, like you think of a conversation as a labyrinth of choices. Okay, so you go along choice. And in therapy, you follow the trail of tears with the goal of healing. And often your life or your job gets better. Okay, so now go back and the path of coaching. So in coaching, what you do is you follow the dreams and the energy of the person. And then for the goal of greatest optimal functioning and life satisfaction, and healing happens. So it's not the goal, but the way I think of it is there's a house of therapy, there's a house of coaching, and they share a number of rooms. Okay. But you never forget what house you're in.
That's beautiful. That makes so much sense. And our experiences, obviously, yes. I mean, our experiences in childhood and then in the workplace, they all stack up as to how we are leading, why we are leading the way we are today, or maybe why we're stuck with some maybe mental, if it's blockage or if there are limiting beliefs. And so this question might be a little bit too general, but I mean, are there certain challenges that most peak performer, like going back to that CEO, that, are there some challenges that a lot of your CEOs are experiencing? Is it that listening piece? Because they're just drive, next step. And so is it too broad to say a lot of CEOs deal with listening, or are there more?
Well, it's interesting. So I work 2 days a week with Egon Zehnder, and which is a search and management consulting company. And they did a research study of 1,000 CEOs. Their combined annual income was $4 trillion. So we're not talking tiny CEOs, we're talking big CEOs.
Okay.
And one of the questions we asked is, what have you heard is your Achilles heel?
Oh, okay.
And
That's a great one.
what they said was talking too much and not listening. Those are the top two things. And so this is a group like that. So you can work with them about that to say, is it really in your people's best interest for you to take center stage all the time? What is in their best interest? What is going to lead to the optimal performance that you need? So I would say yes. That for the CEOs, that was the same for men or women.
Okay.
Actually, it's so funny. I just got this like 10 minutes ago. I wrote an article about this in this book. I mean,
everyone listening to the podcast, you need to jump on YouTube so that you can look at this.
So
real time
leadership, and again, so I sort of, think there's 3 dimensions of leadership, which is what you do, who you are, and how you relate. And then after that, how flexible are you? So that's a lot of what I work with my leaders on, is using the framework in the book of real-time leadership, is that, they get really caught up in what I need to do, my performance, my outcomes. Yeah. And what we say is, well, equally important is who you are. So one of the questions is, well, who do you want to be right now? You're at the end of the day, and one of your reports is like failed you. Okay, who do you want to be right then? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be the guy that loses his temper and makes his person feel bad, and then their performance goes down? Or do you want to be the person who can listen to them and help them actually develop? So it's who do you want to be, and then how do you need to relate? And so a lot of times that provides a bit of a structure for me to kind of challenge the CEOs that I'm working with. And they often appreciate a kind of structure. Absolutely. But the other thing, I wanted to tie together maybe every, I don't know if it's every, but almost all of the CEOs I work with have had traumatic experiences in their lives.
Oh my goodness. In their childhood or early career, or just period? Period.
A lot of them have, just really had to overcome a lot, a huge number. And then that's really interesting about therapy versus coaching. Yeah. So they will talk about, I remember one guy, this wasn't a big trauma, but he was at the dinner table with his stepmother and father, and he said something, and the stepmother said, "Excuse me, I didn't marry you. I married your father." Okay. Now that's not trauma with a capital T, but it's pretty tough. So, and often people with like really, really, really bad stuff, which I won't really talk about, but what you do with this so for those of you who are coaches and you hear something like that, like what do you do? First, you don't like just change the subject. Yeah, you don't dive in either. Okay. I was a trauma psychologist for 20 years. I know how to dive in, and I don't dive in. Okay. What I do is I'll say, so first I'll acknowledge it. And then the question is, how has this experience made you a better leader? Oh, and wow. So for those of you who are watching now who have trauma backgrounds, think about yes, it was painful, but what has that experience done to make you a better human? Because when you've survived trauma, frankly, you're just stronger than the average bear. And how can you really harness that and the meaning that you're among a very significant and very powerful and very successful population who have also had trauma, whether it's, child abuse or rape, or you've been attacked, or a bunch of them started out rich and then something happened and they then went into poverty. A lot of them, one of my clients was a Vietnamese boat person and grew up in a refugee camp.
Wow.
So a lot of these people that when you've had hard experiences yourself, you think, oh, like that makes me weak. Actually, it makes you strong. And again, I just go through each one of my CEOs. They have all been hit on the side of the head, and then they have learned to overcome it. And we're always constantly surprised. I mean, I did this with 400 leaders at Unilever, for example. Most of them had traumatic experiences in their background that they overcame. Same thing in pharma. It really kind of inspires them, like, I'm going to save lives. So that's something about big leaders people don't expect.
That's so inspiring. And I can tell the subtle but impactful difference with your wording of I'm not diving deep like counseling in coaching, because I feel like, am I right that diving deep would have been, how has that trauma impacted you today? But I see the twist that you put on that is, how has that trauma or that experience made you a better leader? And so that has twisted it. Yeah, that has twisted it for the positive. And so
because I was just talking to someone the other day. She did a lot of work actually with murderers. But she was saying, oh, well, they've abused other people, but, they were abused themselves. Okay. I'm like, no. You don't understand. 100% of your murderers may have been abused as children, but the vast majority of people who have been abused don't commit crimes.
Right.
Don't repeat it. They stop it.
Right.
And so, and some of them transform it into powerful drive. Right. And they may overdo it and they need to have, their wrist slapped, but they're coming from a good place. But that was a surprise to us.
Wow. Can you share, I know you've already shared a few personal stories with that CEO. That was funny. Do we really have to care that they're, that's hilarious to me, but can you share another memorable experience where your coaching really transformed one of your students right in front of you, whether it be a CEO or just a story that was very memorable, that you could almost see that light bulb in someone's head and it just kind of changed their way of thinking on the spot there?
Well, what comes to mind is actually when I did that in a team workshop. Very, very, very rarely do you see a team change in a moment. Right. So this one, it was a very high performing team. Everybody in the team made at least $3 or $4 million a year. Okay. Not including their equity. These were
my goodness.
Anyway, this particular CEO just bought what he thought would be the best talent. And it was each individual best talent. Could they play with one another? They were like laptops were flying across the room kind of team.
Stop it.
And we almost gave up on them. Actually, my co-leader wanted to give up on them. And I'm like, I'm a psychologist. I'm not allowed to do that.
I can't.
I'm not allowed to give up on them. So we can't change their CEO, but we can help them work with each other and help themselves be safe. Okay, fine.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Some of these people were from the place like of radical candor. The things they would say to each other and me were occasionally insulting. But the CFO, it was that group. This was a very high-powered group. And so, but the CFO, everybody blasted him all the time. And he was pretty rough. He was a pretty rough guy. But everybody gave him grief, which of course made him tougher. And then they gave him more grief. So we were in the meeting and we were talking, and he said, listen, I'm sorry I sound that way, but a lot of times I just don't know how else to say it. And so they went in for another wave of attacking him, in which case I said, I'm usually not this dramatic in meetings. Most meetings is just like, not ho-hum, but basic. But you asked for a memorable one.
Yes.
So I just went to everybody. These people are not used to being paused around. I just said to everybody, stop. They go, what do you mean? I said, shut up. What? I go, did you hear what he said? And like nobody remembered. And I'm like, say it again. He said, sometimes I have trouble articulating what I want. So then I said to him, so everybody, what is the appropriate answer? What is the appropriate thing for you to say now? You've been attacking him.
Yeah.
Does everybody have an idea what else you could do? It's like complete silence. They want to dive under their table. And the person next to him put her hand on his wrist and said, could you tell us more about that?
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And the whole room just like, and
feel it.
his face lit up. And he was radically changed immediately from people finally being heard. Because when he wasn't heard, he'd just get louder and more controlling. And so but for him, that moment of vulnerability changed everything. It was amazing. Oh, and everyone said later, like, he was like, he became like this happy guy. He's a happy guy. So that was a really dramatic experience. All the things I've shared today are kind of on the dramatic side, but you're asking me questions. But 90% of what you do is just sort of very gentle, asking questions, whatever. A lot of what I do is help my leaders understand each member of the team to say what matters to so-and-so, how can you lead them better? You need to have a unique strategy for interacting with every person on your team.
I see.
And you need to notice things like when you walk in a room and the volume goes down, that's a problem. Has anybody challenged you today? If nobody has challenged you, that's a problem. So usually it's much more basic than these drama stories.
I love them all. I'm learning from every story. And Carol, listening to you, I can see all over your face, your body language, through your words, that this is your calling. Like this is your purpose, your passion work. It flows so easily to your face lights up when I ask you about these stories. And it's giftedness written all over that you are supposed to be doing this, right? What keeps you, because I know coaching, this level of coaching that you do, this is not all easy peasy work. I imagine very difficult times and ups and downs. What is keeping you so inspired in this line of work? Because you're so gifted at it. Why do you love doing this?
Well, do you remember that I told you that I first was a folk singer?
Yeah.
And then I worked with violent horses and also violent dogs. So I was doing this program at Unilever and I was sort of talking. This is not a client. We were just sort of hanging out. And this guy had like the psychological insight level of a gnat on a good day. But imagine he was this like gorgeous, really gorgeous. So gorgeous it was distracting.
Oh gosh.
European guy, and we're talking and he's telling stories and I'm telling stories. And then we got to the horse story and all that. And he goes, I can't do the accent, very continental accent. Goes, oh, I understand. He goes, you went from alpha horses to alpha men.
Oh my goodness, to put it in that. Wow.
Here's this guy who's like a complete psychological idiot, puts my life together in a way that I had never thought.
How did that's wow. That is a statement.
I love taming wild things. That's what I love.
I'm speechless. Because the CEOs, they're
wild things.
They're wild.
Oh, right. My nickname. Somebody gave me a nickname called the Lion Hugger because I love these guys. I really care about these guys.
I can tell.
And very often they're not cared about. Nobody cares about a powerful CEO. Who's going to care about them? And so, I had one guy, big company, like much, much bigger than 300 billion market
Oh
cap.
my
I was told
gosh.
that if I said the real market cap, people could figure out who it is. So I never actually say the market cap anymore. But I remember I got like an emergency call for him on like New Year's Day, like, so-and-so, he needs to talk to you today. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what happened? So I get on Zoom and I'm like, what happened? He goes, I couldn't let the year go by without thanking you. Because
Oh my goodness.
nobody has no agenda with me, Carol. Everybody has agenda. You're the only person who doesn't have an agenda with me.
Oh
So
my gosh.
that's the big thing. It's actually your first task in coaching someone. On one hand, it's like getting yourself like free and whatever. But the first thing you need to do is like your client. Find a place where you care about them. And there's ways to help yourself care about people. Really think about what's good about them, what they respect. If they haven't been nice to you, if it's somebody in your work, had they been nice to somebody else? How can you care about them? And if you can get to that, then they hear you. And then they're willing to change. And I feel like if you don't care about somebody, you don't earn the right to confront them.
Right. And you're right that on the receiving end, people know when they're cared about, right? I mean, we are so intuitive. We're these intuitive creatures. And so you're right. If criticism is falling on almost deaf ears, it's like this block, right? If we feel that someone has an agenda with us, then there's this block and we are not hearing what they're saying. We're resisting policy and change because, man, this person does not care about me as an individual.
Yeah, very, very few people care about these people. That's why if you can go in sort of ego free and not having to prove anything, and this just doesn't matter with top, gigantic leaders like this. This is true with any client.
Okay.
You have to first figure out how to care about somebody. Because again, then I sort of feel you don't have the right, because if you challenge someone or sort of criticize someone and they don't think you care about them, it makes them feel worse about themselves or even shamed or that they have to hide, as opposed to if you're really motivated. Now, some people are not that likable, but you still have to find how to care about them. And at the very least, how to care about their career. Like, I need to help you. Like, you need to get ahead. You are good for this company. And we need to help you on your journey.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. I mean, this is an episode I'm going to listen to back time and time again, Carol, because there is so many pieces of advice, so many pieces of wisdom that you share that apply directly to my life. And is there anything to close this? Because I want to be respectful of your time. You've given me, I think, over on the time that I have asked for you. So just thank you so much. Is there anything I haven't asked you yet that you would like to share about the book, about leadership, about your philosophy that could really impact, listeners today?
Well, yeah, I'll say one thing about the book, The Real-Time Leadership, is the main quote I pull from that informs the spirit of the whole book is a quote by Viktor Frankl, who survived 4 concentration camps in World War II. And one of his quotes is that between every stimulus and response, stimulus is anything that happens to you, a great opportunity, a failed project, something traumatic, and your response, what you think, what you feel, what you do, between the stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is your freedom. And how do you find that space? Primarily by managing your ego. The way you find that space is sort of let go of your own individual needs and become a conduit to give the message or information that the other person needs. So if you think back on every single thing I've said, it's really, that's the core of it all comes from. It's how do you make a space so you can choose how to respond in the moment.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. That is so impactful. You truly, Carol, have changed and impacted so many lives in just this episode. You really
Mhm.
have. I mean, this last 45 minutes or whatever. I mean, you have challenged my thought process. I am leaving today inspired, and I'm just so grateful for people. Yeah. I want to be connected with you. What are the best ways that people can stay connected with you?
Probably the easiest one is, it's not final yet because I need to do it again, but is my website, which
Okay.
is my name.
Okay.
So Carol, Kau, 2 Fs, 1 N. 2 Fs,
Perfect.
1 N.
Perfect.
CarolKauffman.com.
All
And
right.
then you
And
can
we will
find
link.
it there.
Okay. All right. And then we will link all the connection pieces for Carol, guys, so you can stay connected to this light. Oh my gosh, that I have here in front of me. And I want to end the podcast on a quote that you started with, which is my final words is don't hold back.
Mm.
And that is something that as you're listening, if you're driving, listening to this, that is the most inspiring thing that I've heard. And that applies to every single person listening is don't hold back. Go for it. So thank you so much, Carol, for your time today. I want to make this a series. I know you're probably booked out a year in advance, but if I can get on your calendar this time next year and we could talk
Mhm.
about, what has all happened within the last 12 months, you're someone I want to be connected and close with. So
Yeah.
thank you for your time
Yeah.
today, Carol.
You are welcome, and it's been a pleasure. And I do hope the messages can stay with people.
Awesome. All righty. Thank you for listening, everyone.